Well, welcome back, everybody, to Two Pastors and a Mic. My name is Shannick.
And I'm Corey.
And as always, we're so thankful that you're joining us wherever you're listening from or watching from. Thank you so much. We appreciate you just for the feedback, for the affirmation that we've received over the last few weeks. Corey's pumped, and he's pointing to the camera right now.
Yeah.
For those of you that are just listening and not watching, we are on the Grace Awakening Network now as well. And so welcome if you're new to Two Pastors and a Mic.
Yeah.
We do like to have fun on this podcast. We talk about all kinds of sometimes crazy topics, sometimes spicy topics, but also just everyday practical topics as well. But today, I will say it might appear to be just a simple kind of message and simple podcast today, but that there is a depth to what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah,
that is
I don't
really
think this is simple.
Life-changing, if you will. And so we're excited to get into that in just a minute. But before that, as always, remember to like, share, subscribe.
Do it.
Leave a review.
We've been having a lot of people talk on YouTube, so I appreciate all the comments. I like enjoying those on Wednesday and Thursday. So holler, all of you who are watching. That's why I was doing that in the beginning. Just appreciate you looking at us right now. Appreciate you.
Yeah, we really don't have a question of the week today, just because there hasn't been a ton where we feel like that has been like something happening in culture that we really need to give our opinion on. Other than right before this podcast, you asked me if I watched the roast of Tom Brady, and I have not.
That is a cultural huge thing going on right now.
Watched that yet, and I don't know if I will or not. I don't know how I feel about people getting roasted. I know it's funny and all, but I don't know.
I watched it and it was hilarious, but I'm not a big fan, which is like, why would you watch it? And I was like, well, so my dad retired this past year, and my brother Chris, shout out to my older brother Chris, he organized all of us boys, all four of his sons, to do like an honoring ceremony for my dad. And it was incredible. And it was very emotional, and we just got to celebrate my dad's life. And I'll never forget when Chris started, he's like, we live in a culture where when somebody retires, we roast them. And he's like, so why do we hide behind humor and sarcasm when we should be a culture of honor? And yes, I do think the roast is funny. But yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. And so I live in that tension of like, oh man, yeah, why can't we just celebrate people? And we have to celebrate people with cunning or sly or shots, really.
Yeah, so, and I don't know why either. It's just the culture and where we're at. But you did mention you had a prayer request.
What's going on? So actually,
this is our first prayer request. I know,
right?
Shared.
Well, yeah, it is. Maybe if you're listening to this on Wednesday when we release this, I'm actually driving to Indy. My 9-year-old has oral surgery. He's got a cyst in his mouth. They say 90% benign. I'm believing it's 100% benign, but he does have to get it removed so it doesn't jack up his mouth. And I'm probably a terrible father for this, but I've just been messing with Henry so much. He's my, what do you say? He's hilarious, first of all, but he's very thoughtful yet anxious. So he, not as much as Scarlett. Scarlett's anxious every night. Every night I put her to bed. She's in this season where she's like, "Are you going to drive the car away?" I'm like, "No, I have never left after I put you to bed. What is going on? Where did this come from?" But Henry is like, effing like, I can't wait for you to wake up and the things that he's going to say, and I'm going to try and catch on video because they'll probably be very, very funny. I'm like
after the anesthesia,
after everything wears off, I can't wait to see what he might do or say. I'm going to try and get on video and post it for you today. So we'll see.
Wait, we just talked about roasting.
I know.
And and then you're saying you're going to grab a video to make fun of.
Maybe I'll just send it to you and not put it on public. And just
now everybody's going to be like, no, DM me that video too, please.
Right?
That's crazy.
Have you seen that thing with Taylor Swift when she was on the Jimmy Fallon show and she had LASIK eye surgery and she didn't know that Jimmy Fallon had the video because Taylor's mom sent it to Jimmy. And so he's like, a live premiere. And she's like, what's going on here? And it was a video of her right after she had LASIK trying to eat a banana. It was like the funniest thing. And she's mortified.
I have not seen that.
I'm not on that level, but
no, I haven't seen it.
For our 3 fans, I'll share it.
All right, cool. Well, anyway, that's a prayer request. If you're listening on Wednesday,
yep,
make sure you pray for Henry and all that's going on. But today on the episode, we're continuing our conversation around Jesus and the undoing of Adam, written by C. Baxter Kruger. If you've been with us this month, you know we're hoping to get him on the podcast at the end of this month after we finish. We have one more week through the book next week. And then we hope to interview C. Baxter Kruger. That's a big hope that we both have, that's going to happen. So also pray that happens as well. But we're in week 3, and this whole section, like I said earlier, it might appear to be just simple and a simple parallel to what's happening in some scripture, but honestly, it brings so much freedom and really paints a new picture and gives new perspective of a big issue.
Yeah.
And what this issue is, so we can set it up before we get to the chapter, is Jesus on the cross. One of his sayings is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And people will look to that moment, look to that saying. Now, for whatever reason, this saying gets more publicity, and I think he even talks about how more ink has been spilled over the saying than all the other sayings of Jesus on the cross combined. Why don't we focus on the fact that Jesus says it is finished more than we do, or any of the other sayings? But this one gets a lot of notoriety because here it pinpoints to where a lot of people are with the PSA, penal substitutionary atonement theory. And they say, see, here is where, because Jesus took the sin of the world on himself, God can't look upon sin. So God turned his back, turned his face.
Heard that my whole life.
God couldn't look upon sin. In this moment, he had to forsake Jesus because Jesus took the sin of the world upon himself. And so in a sense, God kind of turned his back and separated himself from the Son.
Which is so ridiculous even to think about from a doctrine, theological standpoint. Like, how can one be separate? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. Actually, I had 2 people text me, like, you left me on a cliffhanger from last week, because they just didn't know what we're talking about with this. My God, why have you forsaken me? So,
oh, really?
Shout out to
nice.
y'all who are interested in this. 'Cause I don't think we've ever shared this revelation on the podcast. The fact that the statement that Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me, doesn't mean that God forsook Jesus. And I'll paint that here in just a second. When I first learned this, I actually first heard this from Jamie Englehart about 10 years ago. And it blew my mind so much that I studied it, and I actually wrote about it. It's a portion of my chapter in my first book, Jailbreak, from 2016. But this book was written in 2003.
I first heard this revelation too. We were together about 10 years ago.
And I was like,
but
no
actually,
way.
I just looked. But C. Baxter Kruger wrote this, and it was copyrighted in 2003. So even 10 years before we heard it from Jamie, Baxter Kruger was writing about this. So over 20 years ago. And I'm surprised that a lot of people are just now getting this revelation.
Right.
So basically what he says, what Jamie preached about, what Baxter writes about, is whenever Jesus says, my God, why are you forsaking me? Or why have you forsaken me? He's quoting from Psalm 22, because Psalm 22 verse 1 starts the chapter and begins with, my God, why have you forsaken me? This very same phrase, same words, everything identical in how Psalm 22 opens up to what Jesus said on the cross.
And why is that significant?
This is interesting, and this is what Baxter writes about. He talks about how the psalm, or a song in Jewish culture, if someone were to mention the first line of a psalm, the rest of the people that would have heard it would have started singing the rest of the psalm. So it's like an intro.
We're singing.
Oh, okay. This is the first picture I got. It's funny that you just did that, because as I was thinking about something that I could parallel this to, that's maybe something in the modern day, for whatever reason, and I know this might not be right, I immediately thought of the movie Elf. And in this movie, Elf, you have Will Ferrell, and he was raised by Santa, even though he was a human, goes to New York. Yeah. Well, you even said, I'm singing, whatever. That's what
I'm here with you. And now I'm following where you're going with this. This is brilliant.
But it's at the end of the movie, and there's no Christmas spirit, no Christmas cheer, and they need it to power the sleigh and all that stuff. Well, Elf's girlfriend remembers something that Elf said. The best way to spread Christmas cheer is to sing loud for all to hear. So she gets up in the middle of New York on this little platform, and she starts singing, he's making a list, he's checking it twice, gonna find out who's naughty or nice. And then another lady in the audience sings the second line, and then before you know it, it flashes to the whole crowd singing, and then people on TV that are watching singing. And then you basically have all of New York City singing along to this song
That they all knew.
because
Yep.
the girl sings the first line,
Yep.
and that's it. So in a very similar way,
Yeah. I mean, this
this
probably
is what
this
is happening.
happens in
Jesus
church still
says,
today, though.
why? Yeah, it does. Like you sing, it could be anything. You can be in a crowd, especially with church folk, and you can say, Amazing Grace, and then everybody, how sweet the, and they start singing it.
Yeah.
They know the song by heart,
Yeah.
and if someone opens up with the first line,
You know,
everyone will sing
Yeah,
it.
this happens at weddings when you hear from the window, and then everybody goes to
To
the
the wall.
wall.
We'll stop there. I was wondering if you were going to keep going, but I went ahead and let's make sure that doesn't happen. So anyway, so when Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The people that were there witnessing what was happening with his death on the cross would have immediately went back to Psalm 22. Wait, that's the 22nd Psalm.
Yeah. But why would they have gone back culturally? I think we don't understand culturally the significance of the
Because
Psalms.
they know the Psalm
Right.
by heart. They would have memorized these Psalms.
Right.
And the best way to memorize it, and I would imagine, especially if these Jewish families, they memorized, right, the Torah and a lot of the prophets and the Psalms. If they were to memorize these, I would have to venture to say probably the Psalms were some of the easiest to memorize because it was put to song. How many times in today's culture do we have something we want to teach our kids, and if we put it in a song, they will remember it. They will recite
Actually, Justin Timberlake is posting stuff on TikTok now, and I can't remember what it is, called like the 1 second test, and all they play is 1 second of the song, and he can tell you or sing along what's happening. So the
same.
mind is, but I don't think, I think we need to pause and appreciate this, because we say this so flippantly in church culture today about, oh yeah, they had this stuff memorized. Can our minds be blown for a minute to recognize that they had this stuff memorized?
Right.
Like all of these Psalms. I'm still working on memorization of Scripture. To know most of the Old Testament by heart is bananas. I don't even know. I don't even, my mind is shook right now just thinking about it.
Yeah. No, we can't fathom it because in our culture, that thing is like an impossibility for us, the distractions and all that we have that we fill our time and our life with. There's no way.
Yeah. So he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The
So
crowd,
then they would have went to Psalm
immediately.
22. Wait, that's the first line of the Psalm. And then they would have probably started either thinking about it or singing the rest of the Psalm.
And people say, so was Jesus singing on the cross in this moment? Now, we don't have scriptural proof for it. Kind of we do have scriptural proof for it, but I like to imagine that he is actually singing whatever the melody went along with Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? But what is so cool, and what he unpacks in chapter 3, and are we going to go through all of Psalm 22?
Yeah, we can, but I want to start with the key to this. So just so you know, and our listeners can really understand exactly what we're saying, because Psalm 22 ends with this haunting cry, my God, why have you forsaken me? But if we read it as a whole, all of Psalm 22, we find that the message does not end in despair like it started, but it actually ends in victory. Matter of fact, he ends the last few verses of that song by saying, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will worship before thee. They will come and they will declare his righteousness to a people who will be born, that he has performed it, or he has done it, or he has finished it. Just like he said on the cross, it is finished.
So much parallel. That's incredible. Were you continuing to read that?
No.
portion?
I didn't know if you wanted to go through each one of the.
Oh, you went through
each
the
one of
end
them?
right away. So the beginning, my God, why have you forsaken me? A song that Jesus would have sang. To the conclusion of Psalm 22, it is finished, or he has done it. That's a wild revelation, because then when you go through and you unpack Psalm 22, you read some things that were written by David, maybe thousands of years before this actual event, and they say some things like that. Do you have any highlight ones you want to bring it out?
Well, I just want to say the writer, David, he goes back and forth. Like right after, why have you forsaken me? He goes, my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer. And so it's like, wait, God is like, seems to be, or appears to be like silence in this. But then he changes his story and he goes back to the old stories of God's faithfulness that he shows. And he says this in verses 4 and 5, in you our fathers trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were delivered. In you they trusted and were not disappointed. So he goes back, he's going back and forth in these emotions. And I can only imagine Jesus yes, fully God, but fully man. And he's going through these emotions. Like he is being crucified in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going through this, but he's also painting this picture of ultimately the victory of what the people are witnessing.
Yeah, and he continues. Like, I would just encourage you to just go read Psalm 22 in its entirety. We're not going to do that for you. We're going to highlight some of these verses, but verse 14, I'm poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, it has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Now think about this for a minute.
Second.
Yeah.
Say
as
that.
he's probably singing this, as the crowd is singing this, here's my perspective. The dudes that literally just did what he just sang. They
Right.
casted lots over his garments.
Yeah, they pierced his hands and the feet. They can count on my bones. Jesus didn't have one broken bone on his body. They look at him and they stare at him. He's sitting there like fully naked.
Yeah.
And
And
they're
they
seeing
sing
all
this.
of this and singing this and seeing it on display in front of them.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Here's my revelation. No wonder the guy looks up and says, truly, this was the Son of God, because they're singing about people, what is it? Dividing their garments between them. As they're dividing their garments between them. I mean, I think that revelation's pretty cool. But then he says, but you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. But if you skip back down to verse 24, this is the revealer of this entire song. He says, for he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one, and he has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. So, no, did God the Father ever turn his back on Jesus at the cross? Did God ever forsake him? If you read the rest of the psalm, no, he did not. I think that David is writing about all of these emotions like you already talked about. And I think there's beauty in the psalm that talk about all the emotions. I'm so glad David wrote about his suicidal thoughts, because I think a lot of people can relate to that. And man, when we just understand what was actually going on at the cross, it brings kind of a whole new light to what is happening. Because as you read Psalm 22, it moves from agony to God's victorious intervention, actually, and to a prophesy that the coming generations will look back upon this moment as the salvation of the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm going to actually read what C. Baxter Kruger wrote, because I think it is the culmination of everything that we have said and this revelation that is happening in this moment. But he says, in the greatest of ironies, the cry of Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? Actually sets in motion a line of thought that completely reinterprets what is happening on the cross. Far from being a perverse moment when the angry God pours out his wrath upon the Son and utterly rejects him, the cross is the moment when the Father absolutely refuses to forsake his Son. The moment of moments when he does not hide his face or turn his back upon him in disgust. Here, according to the psalm and its interpretation of the event, there is actually no forsaking at all. In fact, the psalm tells us that that the coming generations will see this event not as divine rejection, but precisely as divine presence and rescue and salvation.
I love that. And I love that they called it perverted, because it is perverted to believe that God turned his back on Jesus. And a lot of people believe that. And again, that is a lot of the beliefs specifically, which is why I am so against penal substitution atonement theory, because I do believe that view is perverted, to think that God turned his back on Jesus. I used to even teach things like God had to turn his back on Jesus so that he could never turn his back on us. And it sounds clever, but it's not true. It's not even scripturally bound. And so when we understand that what Jesus was actually saying on the cross, maybe we should come back to this and do all the 7 statements of Jesus. We did that as a sermon series at Hill City. We called it Reverberate, and not just the 7 statements of Jesus, but the 8 statements of Jesus. Do you remember what the 8th one was?
Yeah, that we're also the light of the world as he is. We're not the other 6, but the 7th, the light of the world, we are also light of the world.
I think those were the 7 statements of Jesus, not the 7 statements on the cross, the I am statements, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I just confused those two,
yeah,
didn't
maybe.
I?
But you tell me. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe I'm wrong. I
I don't
I
know.
can't remember.
I thought that's where you were going with that. Is it?
No idea.
What was the eighth saying?
Who
What were you
knows?
trying to get to?
No, I would put you in the spot because I forgot.
Oh my gosh. I thought it was, yeah, I could be wrong with that.
No. So, my God, why have you forsaken me? Not to mention that Psalm 22 leads us right into Psalm 23, which is one of the most beautiful and most memorized Psalms, even in American culture,
Yeah.
is Jesus being the great shepherd. And that's the truth of who God the Father has always been. He's always been for you. His face has always looked at you, always shone on you, as the prophets of the Old Testament would talk about. And
Yeah.
I think it's just this beautiful
Well,
picture.
and again, I'm just thinking real quick, that is another reminder. If you were to ask people that were raised in church that know the scripture, they would probably know Psalm 23. And if you say, the Lord is my shepherd, they would probably say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. You know, and they would continue to go on
Yep,
with the
because it was a song.
with the psalm, and they would recite it and they would memorize it from just hearing the first line.
Yep.
So it's another connotation of saying, man, when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? It immediately pointed to Psalm 22, and that psalm ends victoriously.
So God never forsook his son. He will never forsake you. It is beautiful. And we encourage you, share this podcast. If this was interesting, text us, comment, share. I already said share it again, do it. And hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks as we have Baxter Kruger. If you are in town, you should come to the conference to hear him live. Or if you can't make the conference on Thursday and Friday of next week, you can come Sunday morning to Hill City Church. He'll also be preaching there.
Right. And that conference is May 23rd and May 24th, that Thursday and Friday at 7 p.m. We'd love to see you there. We'd love to see you that Sunday. We're going to continue next week on our podcast to close out the book, Jesus and the Undoing of Adam. Then we hope to have the author as a guest. But until then, just know you're loved and there's nothing you can do about it.